So we just want to say thanks so much for joining us here today for the Just Brew It workshop, where we are learning how to get a second jolt out of our coffee beans. This is the last of 3 workshops that we're offering this month in our journey to zero waste. This workshop series has been made possible by the Ontario Trillium Foundation and Regional Municipality of York. So we just want to send a shout out and say thank you to them. I should introduce myself. I'm Marissa, and this here is Jess from York Region Food Network. And we also have Christina. She's waving at you. And before we just get started, we wanted to connect on a couple of housekeeping items. I hope everyone can hear me well. I'm not seeing that you can't, so that's good. So we are recording this workshop. So for your privacy and security, we have turned off everyone's cameras and microphones other than our own. If you do have any questions during the presentation, please type them out in our chat because we're going to have a question and answer period at the end of the workshop, and we'll read them all out and we'll address everything. If typing is a little bit much for you, you can just raise your hand in the chat and we'll know to call on you, and then we can unmute you and you can ask your question in person. If anyone has any access needs, please let us know in the chat box, and we'll do our best to accommodate. For those that haven't joined us for past workshops, you can find most of them on our YouTube channel, which we will post in the chat shortly, the link there. So this is a series that we've put together, and it's a transition from our compost workshop that ended last month. And all of those workshops are part of the launch of our York Region Food Network Compost Learning Hub, which is an initiative that will provide opportunities for folks to participate in educational workshops like this one to share ways to incorporate waste-free practices at home. The Hub's physical place will launch in 2021, which we're so excited about. And it's going to offer in-person tours, fingers crossed, and workshops and community events. And until then, we will be hosting them on online forums like this one. And yeah.
And since we're connecting virtually right now, obviously due to COVID, but we do encourage everyone to just take a moment and acknowledge where we're each situated. So Marissa and I and Christina, right now we are situated in Aurora, Ontario, or York Region, Ontario. But it's our basic responsibility to understand and learn about the history of the land that we're on. So we live and work on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people. And we just want to also acknowledge our closest First Nations community, the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. They're about an hour and 15 minutes northeast of us. So many of our practices, including our organizational structure, the seeds we plant, the foods we harvest and prepare, and our methods of growing, a lot of these came to this land through the ongoing process of colonialism. So it's important for us to hold this understanding in our interactions and engagements with the land, and always it's our responsibility to take action beyond just the land acknowledgement. So respecting and caring for the land by nourishing it, that's our responsibility. So as we get into the content of the workshop, let's just continually keep that at the forefront.
Yes. So I'm just going to introduce you to our presenters right now. We have Christina Liu and we have Jess over here. Christina is our very own community food animator at York Region Food Network. She works on our Good Food Box program and runs prepared meals through our kitchens and is always making us here, the staff, like the very best cookies. And I'll just throw in that she has a gig running on the side called Messy Kitchens Baking Company, or Co., which sells these amazing cookies. So you should check it out, and I'm going to post a link there too. Christina is always looking for ways to reduce waste here at the office and at home. And we also have Jess that's going to be doing a segment in this workshop. Jess is our urban agriculture coordinator at York Region Food Network, and she manages all 5 of our community gardens and organizes everything for our gleaning programs and does so much more. She's just recently bought an amazing farm and has big plans for it, so stay tuned. We're just going to get right into the workshop. We're going to play a pre-recorded portion of it. And then again, like I mentioned, please put any questions in the chat and we will get to that as soon as possible. All right.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's workshop as part of the Zero Waste Living series. Today we're doing Just Brew It, and we're using up our old coffee grounds. So why are we using our old coffee grounds? Well, if you're like me and you're an avid coffee drinker, you'll have lots of it lying around, and instead of it going to the landfill, we're going to use it up in different ways. So it's a way to use up our coffee grounds in our house and even in our cooking, and it gives us a way to expand the way we think of scraps, different ways to use it in our kitchen and homes. So the first practical use I want to share with you is how to make a deodorizer for your fridge and freezer. So coffee has caffeine, which is enriched with nitrogen, and the nitrogen helps to crank up carbon's ability to soak up the sulfur. And sulfur is that stinky egg smell that we find in our fridge sometimes, or if we have like fish or other meats, then can kind of like smell up our fridge, and that will help to soak that up. So the nitrogen really helps to absorb that smell, so that's why we're going to make a deodorizer with the coffee. So what I have here are some old coffee grounds that have already been used, and we already drank our coffee. And what I did was I dried them out on a baking sheet, and I left them in the oven. I turned on the fan a little bit on low just to let it dry, or you can do it overnight. So here I have an old container that I don't need anymore, but I can reuse for this purpose. And what I'll do is I'll just put my dry coffee grounds and I'll just spoon it in here, and that's pretty much it. You just put that in your fridge and it's ready to go. And here I have this sock. So you might be wondering, like, why do you have this old sock? And if you have this problem of getting socks that just somehow get lost in your dryer and you have one pair or one sock left that's missing its friend, we can use this to make our deodorizer for our freezer. So I'm going just to put some of our coffee grounds in here. All right, so I just filled it up a little bit and I'm gonna tie it up. And there you have it, our 2 deodorizers. Now I'm gonna put my deodorizers in the fridge and freezer. So for our fridge, we're gonna put our unlidded container. You can also use a bowl, and it acts as if you would put like baking soda into the fridge. So this is gonna be in the freezer. And you can replace it when you notice your fridge starts to smell again. Another way you can use coffee to deodorize is to deodorize your hands. When you're cooking and you are chopping up garlic, or if you're touching, fish or something that really lingers on your fingers, you can keep some coffee grounds by your sink. And if you have some garlicky fingers, you can sprinkle some coffee grounds onto your hands, run it under some water, and it should get the smell out of your fingers. And if we want to get a little fancy with our coffee grounds, we can make ourselves a scrub. And this would also be, kind of a fun present to give as well. What we're going to do is we're going to take some of our coffee grounds, about half a cup. And then we're going to combine it with some coarse salt. And this salt is bigger than the regular sea salt that you would find. It's specifically labeled as coarse salt. And you can also use sugar as well. This is what it's going to be exfoliating. So what you have to keep in mind is that if you have a cut on your hands, you don't really want to use salt because it's going to hurt. And then we have our coconut oil that's been melted. We're just going to add that together. And the coconut oil is what will add the moisturizing aspect of the scrub. So we're just going to mix it together. And it's coming together really nicely. And it looks like that. So what you can do to store it is you can put it in a jar and then just keep it and use it when you want to. And if you want to give it as a gift, that would be great as well. One of the cool ways we're going to use our coffee grounds today is in a rub. So we have our coffee grounds here, and then we have 3 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of garlic salt, and half a teaspoon of black pepper. We have half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. If you don't like it spicy, you can always omit it. We have half a teaspoon of smoked paprika and half a teaspoon of cinnamon. We also have 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of ground mustard, and 4 teaspoons of chili powder. So I'm just gonna toss it into our bowl of chicken here. We have about 2 to 3 pounds. And just toss everything on and mix it together. So the coffee is kind of a unique flavor. There are other recipes that do this as well. And usually coffee grounds can be used as a tenderizer since it's kind of acidic. But since this is used coffee grounds, the acidity won't really be there. So it's not really used as a tenderizer in this recipe. It's more for the earthy flavor. And you can use a medium ground coffee ground. That would be ideal because then it would match the texture and size of the other spices. So we're just gonna rub on our spice rub here, and then we're gonna let it marinate for, 2 hours or overnight if you have the time to. But if you are in a rush, maybe give it 30 minutes and then you can cook it however you like. So we have the smoked paprika in here, and that will give it the smokiness and as well as the earthiness from the coffee grounds. So it's kind of like grilling it if you don't want to grill it. And there you have it, our coffee grounds spice rub. So if you're like me and you love chocolate with coffee, this will be an amazing recipe for you. Today we're gonna make French silk pie, and it's basically a chocolate cookie crust with a luxurious silky chocolate filling, and then we'll have some whipped cream on top. So we're gonna infuse our coffee grounds 2 ways in this recipe. The first is we're going to make our coffee grounds whipped cream. So the first thing we're gonna do is we have half a cup of coffee grounds here and a cup of heavy cream. So I'm just gonna let this sit in this jar in the refrigerator just so we get that nice coffee flavor infusing into our whipped cream. And I'm just gonna shake it around to make sure the sides of it get covered too. And this can go into the fridge for about 2 hours and you can leave it up to overnight. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna make the crust of our pie. And we have here our chocolate cookie crust, chocolate cookie crumbs, and you can just buy cookies and bash them up or buy them pre-ground. So we're gonna put our coffee grounds into our crushed cookies, and this is going to be a 1/4 cup of coffee grounds. And then we also have a 1/4 cup of melted butter. I'm just going to mix it together here until everything is mixed and incorporated. And it's a great way to use our coffee grounds because it gives us that nice coffee flavor, and you don't really notice it too much. As you can see, the cookie crumbs kind of already look like coffee grounds, and it just, incorporates really beautifully. As for the type of coffee grounds that you can really use anything that you have. That's the great thing about this recipe. You don't really need to have a certain grind or flavor. Whatever you drink should be good. Okay, so now that our coffee and cookie mixture resembles wet sand, we're gonna press it into our pie plate. You can use the back of your hand or a spoon, but I'm just gonna use this measuring cup because it kind of fits the shape of my pie plate here. And I have my oven preheating at 375 right now. So once I press this in, I'm just gonna pop it in for 10 minutes. Great, there you have it. Our cookie crumb and coffee grounds crust. So this is gonna go into the oven for about 10 minutes. So for our filling, we're gonna whip up some cream, and this is gonna help make our chocolate filling nice and light. We have half a cup of cream here, and I'm just gonna mix it into our bowl. Of course, if you have an electric mixer or a handheld mixer, feel free to use that. Our whipped cream looks pretty good. We want soft peaks, and this is about what we have right now. And this will go in the filling later, but for now we're just gonna put it in the fridge to keep. And while I was whipping my cream, our crust finished. So this is what it looks like finished. It looks pretty much the same. We're just gonna let it cool, and then we're gonna continue on with our filling. So I have 3/4 of a cup of chocolate chips here. These are semi-sweet chocolate chips, and I'm just gonna melt them. You could either do them over a double boiler or in the microwave in about 15 to 20 second increments. So I'm just gonna go to the microwave and melt them. Our chocolate is all melted now, and we're gonna let it cool for a bit while we make the rest of the filling. So I have 1.5 cups of unsalted butter that's been softened to room temperature. So I'm gonna add it to our mixer here. I have 3/4 cup of white sugar. And now I'm just gonna mix it until it becomes light and fluffy. So our butter and sugar mixture have been creaming together, and it's almost there, but I'm just scraping down the sides of our bowl to make sure I can whip it enough. It's almost there, but not quite. It's a little thick still, and it's not quite that color that will be like pale white or pale yellow when it's nice and fluffy. So I'm gonna set it on high again and mix it for another minute or two. Alright, so our mixture looks pretty good. The butter and sugar are now pretty fluffy. It's a nice light cream color, and you can see that the sugar granules have mostly dissolved. And it's not as thick as it was before. So that's what we want to see. So I'm going to add now our cooled chocolate mixture. And next we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we're going to mix it again until it's incorporated. Great. So I can see that I have some butter on the side of my bowl and on my mixer here. So I'm just going to scrape that down to make sure that everything gets incorporated. Alright, so now that our butter and chocolate mixture are nicely combined, we're now going to add our eggs. And we have 4 eggs here, but we're going to do it one at a time and mixing for about 3 to 5 minutes for each egg. And this is going to create the volume that we're looking for, which is going to give us a nice silky light texture. done. It looks very light and fluffy. I guess it's sort of like mousse-like. So it looks like that. Beautiful. Now it's going to go into our crust, but it's not going to be baked. This is a kind of set it in the refrigerator pie, and I know that there's raw eggs in here, so if you're not comfortable using raw eggs, you can try to use pasteurized eggs. So we have our whipped cream from before, and now I'm just going to fold in the whipped cream into our mixture here. And you want to be gentle because the whipped cream is added to give it the lightness, like extra lightness. We don't want to deflate the cream, otherwise we lose that airiness. So I'm just going to fold it in, like so. And it really feels like very light and fluffy, kind of like a chocolate cloud. Alright, so now we have our crust. I'm going to pop it in. And how amazing does that look? Okay, so our last step is we're going to strain our mixture from before. And we want to find mesh sieve that will catch all the coffee grounds. So if you want to use a cheesecloth, that would be good as well. That's pretty good. All right, so this now we're going to incorporate our powdered sugar. Okay, powdered sugar and whipping our cream again. Our whipped cream is looking really good. So it's maintaining its peaks here. So I think it's good to go. And we're just gonna dollop our cream on top of our cloud. So it's gonna be like a double cloud. And if you don't feel like making this whole pie, I would definitely recommend you make this with cream and then put it in some like hot chocolate. I think that'd be really good. All right, there you have it. That's our French silk pie. So we're just gonna put our pie into our fridge now and let it set for about 2 hours, and it'll firm up a little bit and it'll be good to eat. I hope you've enjoyed learning about all the different ways to use our coffee grounds today. From our scrub to our pie to our deodorizer. There's so many cool things that we can do, and there are actually more things we found online but we didn't get to try ourselves. There are things like if you have a scratch on a wooden surface, you could put some coffee grounds to stain the scratch so it looks like there's nothing there. You can make clay with it, so if you have kids, it's like a fun non-toxic way of making like fossils, or even non-toxic paint. So if you put some coffee grounds and some water, mix it together, you have like a nice brown color that you can paint with. There are also cool ways that you can use coffee grounds in the garden. Let's throw it to Jess.
Thanks, Christina. So coffee grounds can definitely be a great addition to your soil, in your garden, and your compost piles. Instead of having it go to the landfill where it just creates all these harmful greenhouse gases, we can actually divert it, and it can break down into a really healthy compost for our soil. One question that a lot of people have is that if coffee is acidic, wouldn't adding coffee grounds into your soil make it affect your soil pH? And I think that's a really great question. But the answer to that is that the acidity in the coffee beans is actually water soluble. So that means the acidity ends up in your pot of coffee that you brewed, and not in the leftover coffee grounds. What's actually left over is pretty neutral in pH, so somewhere between 6.5 to 6.8 on the scale. So that's pretty good and unlikely to acidify your soil. So no worries there. So coffee grounds in your soil really helps to build structure. And it also helps to boost the activity and temperature of your compost pile. It's true that coffee grounds are high in nitrogen, which is pretty important for our plants. However, when you're adding coffee grounds, it doesn't necessarily mean that the nitrogen in it is immediately available for your plants. So what it does is it helps to boost the presence of nitrogen-loving microorganisms that will feed on the nitrogen in your coffee grounds and help to break down all the different materials in your compost, which is great. That's what we want. But it just doesn't mean that your plants are going to get the nitrogen directly from your coffee grounds. So, really important, make sure you still add other nitrogen sources. This is usually what we call greens or green materials. So that would be your fruit and vegetable scraps from the kitchen, or grass clippings, that kind of thing. So that way your plants can still have a source of nitrogen without you relying solely on the coffee grounds as your source of nitrogen. If you do spread your coffee grounds directly in the soil, that's great, especially if you don't have a compost pile or you don't really feel like going out to your compost bin, but you do want to just spread it out on the soil. One thing I want to warn you of, though, is that when coffee grounds are dried, you can actually test it. So if you have some dried coffee grounds with you right now, you can pour some water on there and take a look at how it reacts with the water. It doesn't actually absorb the water very well. So it's similar to peat moss in that way, where it actually sort of forms a barrier for water. So that's not a terrible thing unless you've got it all in a thick layer on top of your soil, right where your plants are, and you're trying to water your plants. So what you'll see is that the water will actually sort of trickle off to the side, and the roots of your plant aren't going to get the water that it needs. So what I would recommend is to spread out your coffee grounds evenly and just mix it in with your soil. That way the water is actually able to go down into the soil, be absorbed, and feed the plants and the vegetables and fruits that you're growing. And the last tip that I have for you is that coffee grounds when they're dried, don't tend to get moldy or go bad. So it's a great idea to have a waterproof bin with a lid beside your compost bin, or even in the garage or in your kitchen, and just dry out your coffee grounds. If you're drinking every single day, I'm sure you're accumulating a whole bunch of coffee grounds, so spread it out on a sheet or a baking tray and let it dry out, and when it's dry, put it into the waterproof bin. And then that way, if you make a visit out to your compost bin every week, or even if it's winter time and you just don't feel like going out right now into the snow and the cold, you can save your coffee grounds for a later date, and whenever you're ready, you can take out some of the coffee grounds and add it to your compost or add it to your garden. So that's my tip for you. But that's about it. So happy cooking, happy cleaning, happy gardening, and I hope you got some really good ideas to use this awesome reusable material.
All right, so there we've got it. We have used coffee grounds in very many ways, from cooking to cleaning to washing our own hands to the garden. So if you have any questions for Christina or Jess in other ways to use coffee grounds, or to clarify any of the information that was shared, please let us know. Raise your hand in the chat or type your question in the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them. I think that we do have one question. Were the coffee grounds that you used in the recipes dry already or still wet, Christina?
They were dried. So what I did, as Jess described at the end, to dry them out, I just put them on a baking sheet, and then I put them in the oven just so it's like protected, and let it dry out there.
Okay, and that was in all in the recipe and the scrubs?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. We have another question. Will coffee grounds attract mice or voles? That one's for Jess.
So I would say not any more than your vegetable scraps or your fruit scraps would. So it's an equal, like it's similar to any of the greens that you would put in. So really just whatever you do to troubleshoot with like critters, you would do the same thing. If you do find that mice and voles are sort of showing up, I don't think it would necessarily be the coffee grounds. But we will, talk in a later workshop about some troubleshooting tips for composting. So definitely stay tuned for that.
Amazing. And also, is there something in regards to repelling insects? Do coffee grounds do that? I mean, I don't know if that's fact or fiction, but I've heard of that before.
That's a great question, actually. So there is definitely anecdotal sort of evidence that it would repel things like slugs and snails and that kind of thing. But right now, just based on the research out there, it is still pretty anecdotal, meaning that it's sort of told through stories rather than shown through like data. So, take that as you will. It doesn't mean that it's not true, but it's just, it might be true, it might not be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I just heard it, so I was like always wondering, is that true? All right. It doesn't look like we have many more questions. You guys must have explained everything really well. I just want to let everybody know that we will be sending a link to this video and this workshop for those of you that might have joined a little bit later, or for some that weren't able to make it, in a follow-up email. And along with that, we will send the recipes and everything that was shared in this video, any resources that we have. Okay, so keep an eye out for that email. I really want to thank Christina. I really want to thank Jess for taking the time to share some of this amazing information. And for everybody, I just want to say to you, thank you for joining us. And I hope that you found some interesting ways that work for you in how to reuse, repurpose, and continue the life of your coffee grounds. All right, so we're going to sign off here. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you. This is our last workshop of 2020, so we look forward to seeing you in 2021. Bye.